Somewhere inside you lives a man the world has never seen. He does not perform for approval. He does not fold under weight. He does not disappear when everything familiar is stripped away. He has been waiting, buried under decades of habit, comfort, disappointment, and noise. Most people go to their graves without ever shaking his hand. Today that ends. Picture this. You open your eyes tomorrow, and the life you spent a decade constructing is gone. Your name means nothing anymore. Your accounts are empty. The people who used to text you good morning have vanished into silence. The future you sketched out in your head, gone, like it was never real. For most people, that would be the closing chapter. For the Stoics, it was the opening line of something stronger. Over 2,000 years ago, men faced ruin on a scale most of us will never touch. They watched entire civilizations collapse. They buried children. They survived chains, banishment, treachery, hunger, and the daily company of death. And yet we still say their names. Life could break their bones, but it never once touched their minds. That's the reason Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius are still spoken today, while the men who tried to crush them are dust nobody remembers. Here's the problem with the world we live in now. It is engineered to remove friction before you ever meet it. Hardship gets intercepted before it can teach you anything. Discomfort gets numbed before it can build you into something. Every obstacle is treated like an intruder instead of what it actually is, the furnace where character gets made. And slowly, quietly, this produces people who look accomplished on the surface and shatter the instant something goes wrong underneath. One no, and his self-worth collapses. One mistake, and he decides he's finished. One betrayal, and he's convinced life picked him to lose. But the old Stoics knew something we've unlearned. Nothing gets forged in comfort. Steel isn't tempered by a gentle afternoon. It's tempered by fire it didn't ask for. Canyons aren't carved by calm weather. They're carved by centuries of violent water. Coal doesn't become a diamond by sitting still. It becomes one under pressure that would crush almost anything else. This is the same rule everywhere in nature. Nothing rare exists without first outlasting what ordinary things could not. In the next few minutes, you're going to walk through 8 laws that have outlived empires. These aren't slogans built for a poster or a 5-minute mood boost. They are principles that steadied emperors, slaves, soldiers, and quiet, ordinary men who decided the world would not get to choose the state of their minds. Take these seriously, and they can rewrite how you handle fear, pressure, chaos, and every storm still waiting for you down the road. So before we start, sit with one question. The next storm is coming. It always does. Are you going to be swept off your feet by it, or are you going to be the one still standing when it's over? Let's begin. Law 1. You don't own the weather. You own the wheel. Go stand at the edge of the sea and watch a storm roll in. The tide doesn't ask if you're ready. The wind isn't interested in your 5-year plan. The clouds don't part just because you needed a good day. Nature has never once asked permission from a human being. But every seasoned sailor knows something the terrified passenger never figures out. Staying alive was never about taming the ocean. It was always about steadying his own hands. That single realization is the bedrock of Stoic philosophy, not because it makes existence painless, but because it makes a person harder to break than existence itself. Every fear that keeps you up at 3 a.m., every letdown that drains you dry, every anxious spiral about tomorrow, they all start with the same lie, that you were owed control over things that were never yours to begin with. The instant you buy into that lie, your peace of mind becomes a hostage to whatever happens next. Nobody understood this more completely than Epictetus. Long before he became one of the most quoted minds in history, he was property. Another man owned his body, his schedule, his safety, even his next meal belonged to someone else's whims. But there was one square inch of him no master could ever seize: his own judgment. While the world around him tried to define him through chains, he found the only weapon that can never be confiscated: Nobody can enslave a mind that refuses to hand over its own verdict. Most people are exhausted from fighting wars they were never going to win. They obsess over how they're perceived. They rerun arguments from years ago on a loop. They chase validation from people who forgot their name by lunch. They grip outcomes that haven't even happened yet, trying to will reality into cooperating. And when reality doesn't cooperate, because it never does, they call that proof they're weak. It was never weakness. It was just the wrong fight. Marcus Aurelius sat on the throne of the largest empire on the planet. Yet every single night he wrote down the same reminder to himself. He could send legions across continents, but he couldn't stop a fever. He could pass laws for millions, but he couldn't force a single heart to change. If the most powerful human being alive made peace with that ceiling, what exactly are the rest of us doing demanding control that even he never had? Picture two people who lose their jobs on the same Monday morning. One spends the next 3 months furious at the economy, at his boss, at his luck, at everyone except the one place where his power actually still lives. The other allows himself 20 honest minutes of disappointment and then asks a sharper question. What's in my hands before the sun goes down today? That question rewires everything. By nightfall, he's rewritten his resume, reached out to 3 old contacts, and started learning something new. Same disaster, same planet, completely different outcome. This is why the Stoics never judged a man by what happened to him. They judged him by what he did next. Circumstances don't build your character. They expose whatever was already sitting there. When the storm hits, panic doesn't manufacture courage out of nothing. It only shows you whether courage was ever in the room. Nature never needs to be told this twice. A cliff doesn't negotiate with the tide. A river doesn't hold a grudge against the boulder in its path. A flame doesn't resent the fact that it burns. Everything in the natural world accepts what's in front of it and moves. Human beings are the only ones who spend years arguing with what already happened, while the next chapter quietly slips away unread. Starting today, build one habit that can reroute your whole life. The second something painful lands on you, pause before your emotions grab the wheel. Ask, honestly, is this mine to control? If not, let it go. No apology owed. If it is, stop narrating the problem and start moving on it. Your energy is far too valuable to burn on outcomes reality already decided without you. Master this, and something strange happens. Life doesn't get gentler. The storms don't shrink. People don't magically become kinder. But you become someone whose calm is no longer rented from the weather outside. And the moment that happens, the world has lost its favorite weapon against you. Because every unshakable mind starts with the same choice. Stop wrestling the wind and finally learn to hold the wheel. Law 2. Chosen discomfort is the fire that shows you who you are. Every human being wants the same basic thing. A life with the pain filtered out. No uncertainty. Every door opening on cue. Every relationship lasting. Every plan landing exactly as drawn. It sounds ideal, until you notice that nothing in nature has ever become strong without first becoming uncomfortable. The tree with the deepest roots isn't the one that grew in a sheltered garden. It's the one that had to fight for every drop of water in dry soil. Nature has never once rewarded ease. It rewards whatever adapts, and the world we've built has quietly sold us the idea that ease is the reward. Meals appear before hunger can teach anything. Noise fills every silence before reflection gets a chance to speak. Answers arrive instantly before curiosity has to work for them. Every rough edge gets sanded down before resilience is even born. Day by day, the body gets softer while the spirit stays untested. Then one ordinary disaster shows up, and you discover, too late, that the real danger was never the disaster. It was the years spent getting too comfortable to meet it. Musonius Rufus saw this coming nearly 2,000 years ago. He warned that a man who never walks toward discomfort on his own terms will eventually be dragged into it against his will. And there's a real difference between the two. Discomfort you chose builds you. Discomfort that ambushes you exposes whatever you failed to build. Life gives the same final exam either way. The only variable is whether you studied. Picture two blades resting side by side. One has never seen heat. It gleams. It looks flawless. The other has been thrown into flame, hammered flat, plunged into cold water, and sent back into the fire, over and over. To an untrained eye, they look identical, but the first real fight tells the truth. One snaps, the other becomes the reason the fight was won. Human character follows the exact same law. Fire doesn't ruin real strength. It reveals whether it was ever there. Seneca, a man of considerable wealth, deliberately lived like he had none. Coarse clothing, plain food, a hard bed, by choice. Not because he thought suffering was noble, but because he understood that comfort creates dependency, and dependency is dangerous. Every voluntary hardship whispered the same question at him. If everything you own vanished by morning, who would be left standing? Most people are terrified of that question. Seneca wanted the answer settled long before life forced it on him. Ask yourself honestly, why does going broke feel so catastrophic? Why does rejection feel unsurvivable? Why does one failure feel like the death of your identity? It's almost never because the event itself is unbearable. It's because your imagination has never once rehearsed surviving it. Fear grows biggest around whatever you've never dared to face. The unknown is always bigger in your head than it is in reality. That's why soldiers train under exhaustion before ever seeing combat. Why athletes suffer in empty gyms nobody's watching. Why the old philosophers chose small doses of hardship, the rest of the world spent its whole life dodging. They knew a law that keeps proving itself. The body remembers what the mind erases. Every hard thing you've survived on purpose becomes quiet proof you can survive the next uninvited one too. Confidence was never built with affirmations. It's built with memory. There's a deeper layer most people never reach. Chosen hardship isn't just training the body, it's training identity. Every time you pick discipline over the easy way out, patience over impulse, silence over a reaction, you're casting a vote for who you're becoming. Character isn't forged in one big cinematic moment. It's carved, slowly, in hundreds of unwitnessed decisions nobody claps for. Look again at the mountains. They didn't rise overnight. They rose because pressure never let up for millennia. Look at a diamond. It never once asked the earth to lighten the load above it. The weight itself became the beauty. Look at a river. It never complained about the stone blocking its path. The resistance is exactly what made it stronger. Nature keeps handing us the same lesson. Resistance isn't your enemy. It's your sculptor. So stop begging life for an easier road. Ask yourself to become someone harder to break instead. Stop praying the next storm will be small. Become someone who can walk through a big one without losing his footing. Every early morning, you don't hit snooze on your discipline. Every hard conversation you stop postponing. Every temptation you say no to. Every promise you keep with nobody watching. None of it looks impressive in the moment, but stacked together, it builds a mind circumstances can no longer intimidate, because one day, life is going to knock without warning, without checking if you're ready, without caring whether the timing feels fair. And in that moment, you won't rise to meet your hopes. You'll fall back to whatever level you actually trained for. That's exactly why the Stoics never feared hardship. What they feared was becoming someone who needed comfort just to stay upright. Law 3. Rehearse the worst before life makes you improvise it. Here's a strange fact about fear. It's almost never manufactured by what's real. It's manufactured by imagination. Long before life ever actually wounds you, your own mind has already written and directed a full film about how devastating that wound will be. It convinces you a failure will erase your identity, that rejection will prove you're unworthy, that loss will hollow you out forever. Then, one day, you realize something jarring. You were never fighting reality. You were fighting a script your own head wrote for you. The Stoics refused to be hostage to disasters that hadn't even happened. While most people flinch away from uncomfortable thoughts, the Stoics walked straight at them. They asked the questions everyone else spends a lifetime avoiding. What if I lose it all? What if the people closest to me walk away? What if tomorrow demolishes today's plan entirely? Not because they were drawn to darkness, but because they knew a fear starts losing its grip the instant you actually look at it directly. Seneca had a name for this practice: premeditatio malorum, rehearsing adversity in advance. From the outside it looks bleak. In reality, it's one of the most freeing mental habits ever devised. He understood something we forget constantly. The unknown is always scarier than the known. Fear thrives in the dark and shrinks the second light hits it. A shape behind a closed door looks enormous until someone finally opens it. Think about walking through unfamiliar woods after the sun goes down. Every twig snap sounds like a threat. Every rustle feels like a predator closing in. Your mind starts inventing danger that was never actually there. Then dawn breaks. The same forest is standing exactly where it was. But almost every fear you had evaporates. Not because the forest changed, but because the dark stopped running your perception. This is precisely what Stoic mental rehearsal does. It swaps emotional darkness for clear-eyed awareness. Marcus Aurelius practiced this every single morning, before life had a chance to test him. Before leaving his room, he told himself he'd cross paths with selfish people, liars, arrogant people, and the ungrateful. Why prepare for that on purpose? Because expectation is what manufactures most suffering. Reality on its own rarely does. A man expecting perfection gets flattened by an ordinary bad day. A man who expects friction meets it like a familiar road he's walked before. Most people assume confidence comes from believing things will go well. The Stoics flipped that entirely. Real confidence comes from knowing that even if everything falls apart, you'll still recognize yourself on the other side. The strongest person isn't the one convinced disaster will skip him. It's the one who already decided who he'll be the day it doesn't. Think of a grandmaster at a chessboard. Before his hand touches a single piece, he's already lived through a dozen imagined defeats. Every attack has been walked through in his head. Every risky trade has already been weighed. When the unexpected finally lands on the board, he doesn't panic. He recognizes it. His calm isn't a gift, it's rehearsal. He's already been there once, in his mind. Life runs on the same mechanics. One day your career shifts without warning. One day someone you trusted turns on you. One day illness walks into your family. One day the future you built in your head simply doesn't show up. The Stoics never wasted time asking if. They asked something far more useful. Who will I be when it happens? Because circumstances don't ask permission, but who you become in response is always a choice. Here's the part people misunderstand most. This practice was never about expecting tragedy. It's about stripping tragedy of its power to blindside your soul. A surprise breeds panic. Preparation breeds presence. Panic fogs your judgment. Presence hands you options. It's the same event, but a completely different person meeting it. Nature demonstrates this without a single word. Long before winter lands, trees start letting go of their leaves. Rivers begin to slow. Birds start migrating while it's still warm. Nothing in the wild waits for a storm to start preparing for it. Only humans convince themselves that preparation equals pessimism, and then wonder why unexpected hardship leaves them in pieces. So carve out a few quiet minutes each week and ask the uncomfortable questions. If everything changed overnight, what part of you would stay exactly the same? If success disappeared tomorrow, would you disappear along with it? If life peeled away your comfort, your title, your applause, what would still be left standing? That's the piece the Stoics devoted their lives to strengthening, because they understood that nothing life can take from you was ever the true foundation of your peace. The modern world tells you to just think positive. The Stoics offered something far more useful. Think clearly. Meet reality before it arrives at your door. Meet fear before fear meets you. Then, when life eventually knocks with suffering in its hands, it won't find a frightened stranger cowering behind that door. It'll find someone who already opened it in his mind and discovered courage had been waiting there the whole time. Law 4. The obstacle isn't blocking you, it's revealing you. Everyone thinks they're strong right up until life tests it. It's easy to call yourself patient when nothing's testing your patience. Easy to call yourself brave when nothing you love is on the line. Easy to feel at peace when everything's already going your way. But the second the direction changes, the truth surfaces. Obstacles don't build character out of nowhere. They expose whatever was already hiding under the comfort. Most people default to the same wrong question: why is this happening to me? They go hunting for someone to blame: fate, bad luck, difficult people, the economy, their upbringing, an unfair world. Every excuse offers a quick hit of relief, but none of them make anyone stronger. The Stoics asked a completely different question instead. What is this obstacle teaching me that comfort never could? That one shift turns suffering from an enemy into a teacher. Marcus Aurelius wrote something remarkable while surrounded by war, plague, betrayal, and death. What stands in the way becomes the way. That line wasn't scribbled from inside a marble palace by a man on vacation. It was written by an emperor sleeping in military tents, watching friends die around him, an entire empire resting on his shoulders. He wasn't describing an ideal. He was describing reality as it actually was. Picture a river heading toward the sea that suddenly meets a mountain of solid rock. It doesn't sit there complaining for a century about the rock's location. It just starts moving differently, around it, under it, or one patient drop at a time straight through it. Years pass, then centuries. Eventually, the immovable mountain starts to disappear. The river doesn't win because it was more powerful in one single moment. It wins because it never stopped moving. Humans tend to do the opposite. One rejection, and they decide they're unlovable. One failure, and they decide they're incapable. One betrayal, and they decide nobody can ever be trusted again. A single bad chapter gets mistaken for the whole book. Yet history never remembers people because life handed them an easy road. It remembers the ones who turned their obstacles into the exact reason they became extraordinary. Cleanthes understood this better than most. Long before he led the Stoic school, he spent his nights hauling buckets of water through the streets just to afford his education. While others slept, he worked. Plenty of people would have read that poverty as proof life was against them. Cleanthes read it differently. Every bucket he carried was quietly building the mind that would go on to shape generations. Look at nature again. A pearl begins as an irritation. An oyster never picks the grain of sand that gets inside its shell. It simply responds, layer by layer. What started as pain becomes the very thing people prize. The pearl doesn't exist despite the irritation. It exists because of it. The obstacle wasn't a detour from the process, it was the process. This is the part the modern world keeps trying to skip. We're trained to eliminate friction the instant it shows up. The Stoics believed something far more useful, that every hardship carries a hidden invitation, not an invitation to enjoy suffering, but an invitation to become the version of yourself that suffering can no longer control. So the next time life drops a wall in your path, resist the urge to immediately ask, how do I get around this? Ask instead, who could I become because of this? That single question can redirect an entire life, because sometimes the door you keep hunting for was never actually there. Sometimes life is simply waiting for you to become someone who no longer needs it. Law 5. Master the gap, or spend your life obeying every emotion. The biggest battles you'll ever fight won't be physical. They'll happen in the sliver of space between what happens to you and how you decide to respond. That gap is invisible. Most people never even notice it exists. Life hits, and they react instantly. Someone insults them, and anger speaks before reason gets a word in. Someone betrays them, and revenge becomes their first language. One moment steals years of peace, not because the moment was so powerful, but because they handed away the one thing that was actually theirs to keep, their response. The Stoics understood something the modern world keeps forgetting. Every emotion shows up like a visitor knocking, asking to be heard. But emotions were never meant to sit on the throne. They're messengers, not rulers. Anger carries information. Fear carries a warning. Grief carries proof of love. But the moment you let any emotion run the show, the messenger quietly climbs onto the throne and starts making your decisions for you. Picture an alpine lake at dawn, dead still, so calm it mirrors the sky perfectly. Every cloud, every star, exactly as it is. Now drop a single pebble in. The reflection shatters instantly. The sky itself didn't change one bit. Reality stayed exactly as it was. Only the surface got disturbed. That's precisely what unchecked emotion does to an untrained mind. The world doesn't warp. Your perception does. And any decision made in disturbed water carries that distortion with it wherever it goes. Epictetus warned his students never to confuse the event with the story they immediately attach to it. Someone insults you, that's the event. Deciding your dignity is now destroyed, that's the story. You lose money, that's the event. Deciding your whole future is over, that's the story. A relationship ends, that's the event. Deciding you're unlovable, that's the story. Most suffering doesn't start with reality. It starts with the meaning we slap onto reality before wisdom gets a chance to speak first. That's why the Stoics trained themselves to pause, not because they were slow and not because they lacked feeling, but because they knew the first impulse is usually the voice of fear, ego, or wounded pride, rarely the voice of reason. The strongest mind isn't the quickest to react. It's the slowest to hand over control. In that brief silence between the spark and the response, an entire future quietly changes course. Think about an archer. Once the arrow leaves the string, it can never be called back. Every reckless word works exactly the same way. Every rash decision, every impulsive move. Once it's out, it's traveling on its own, completely outside your control. Whole friendships have ended over a sentence spoken in 10 seconds. Whole families have splintered over a decision made in one overheated evening. Whole lives have taken a different shape because someone refused to wait even 60 seconds before acting. Time carries a strange gift. It drains the intensity of emotion while sharpening clarity. The pause lets wisdom show up before regret does. Nature has always understood this. A predator doesn't strike the moment it spots movement. It watches, waits, calculates. Its power comes from disciplined patience, not restless urgency. The tallest trees survive brutal storms because they bend instead of standing rigid. The stars themselves drift in complete silence, never rushing, never forcing anything. Strength has never belonged to the loudest force in the room. It's always belonged to the most controlled one. Marcus Aurelius carried an empire's weight on his back. Every day brought fresh news of betrayal, uprisings, corruption, death. Think of how many chances he had to lash out. Yet before he ever tried to govern Rome, he governed something far harder, his own mind. He understood that a ruler who can't command his own emotions eventually becomes their servant. The empire outside always mirrors the empire within. Here's the tragedy of modern life. People mistake intensity for authenticity. I just say what I feel. This is who I am. The Stoics would push back with a sharper question. Are those feelings serving your best self, or simply running the show unchecked? Freedom was never about doing whatever you feel. Freedom is choosing which feelings actually deserve your obedience. So the next time life provokes you, resist the itch to prove your strength on the spot. Go quiet instead. Let the anger arrive without crowning it. Let fear speak without letting it vote. Let pride knock without answering the door. Because every emotion weakens the moment it realizes you won't obey it blindly. Anyone can react. Anyone can raise their voice. Anyone can chase revenge. But only a trained mind can stay still while chaos demands a response. And that stillness has beaten more enemies than anger ever has. Because the person who masters the gap no longer belongs to his emotions. His emotions finally belong to him. Law 6. Stop taking it personally, and the world loses its grip on you. There's an invisible cell millions of people live inside without ever noticing the door was never actually locked. Every insult lands like a wound. Every piece of criticism feels like an assault. Every rejection becomes evidence they're not enough. They wake up every morning dragging the weight of opinions that were never theirs to carry, fighting wars that exist only inside their own heads. The tragedy isn't that people judge them. The tragedy is that they keep handing those judgments the authority to define who they are. The Stoics grasped something that quietly rewires your entire relationship with the world. People don't see you the way you actually are. They see you the way they are. Every opinion gets filtered through someone else's fears, insecurities, ambitions, and unhealed wounds. The angry man finds enemies everywhere because anger already lives inside him. The jealous man sees arrogance where there is none because envy has already warped his lens. The dishonest man suspects betrayal everywhere because betrayal is the only language his own character speaks. Their judgment is rarely a mirror of you. It's almost always a mirror of themselves. Picture a perfectly still lake. If the water's clean, your reflection is exact. But stir in mud, waves, or shadow, and suddenly your reflection looks warped and cracked. Did your actual face change? No, only the surface looking back at you did. People work the same way. A mind clouded by pride, resentment, or insecurity simply cannot reflect reality clearly. And yet most of us spend years trying to fix a reflection that was distorted to begin with. Epictetus taught that an insult carries no power on its own. It only gains power the moment you agree with it. Sit with that. An insult is just sound moving through air. It becomes pain only after your mind ratifies it as true, which means most of your suffering isn't imported from outside, it's manufactured on the inside. The world can throw words at you all day. Only you decide whether those words become chains or just echoes that fade in an empty canyon. Marcus Aurelius governed millions, and every choice he made earned him both praise and hatred simultaneously. Some called him the finest emperor Rome ever had. Others called him weak. Some said too harsh. Others said too soft. Trying to satisfy all of them would have been a fool's errand, so he stopped trying. He realized that if one man calls you a hero and another calls you a disaster on the very same afternoon, then neither verdict can possibly define your worth. Truth can't be at the mercy of whoever's watching. Nature makes this obvious. The sun doesn't dim because someone curses the heat. The mountain doesn't shrink because a hiker complains about the climb. The tide doesn't apologize for existing. They just keep doing what they were made to do without negotiating with every passing complaint. Yet humans regularly abandon their own path because of one stranger's comment made in a bad mood. We let temporary noise interrupt permanent purpose. There's a deeper truth buried in this law, maybe the most freeing one of all. The people who wound others most often are carrying wounds they've never dealt with themselves. A cruel person is rarely at peace. A bitter soul is usually nursing invisible pain. Someone determined to humiliate others is often at war with his own reflection. That doesn't excuse the behavior, but it does change how you carry it. Compassion becomes possible where revenge used to live. Understanding replaces resentment that never needed to exist in the first place. Picture an old oak that's outlived every season for 100 years. Kids carve their initials into its bark. Storms rip off its limbs. Travelers nap in its shade and never say thank you. Birds nest, then leave. Winter strips it bare. Spring dresses it again. Through every version of the year, it stays rooted in exactly what it is. It doesn't shrink because someone ignored it. It doesn't grow because someone admired it. Its strength comes from its roots, never from applause. Ask yourself honestly, how many choices in your life were made purely out of fear of what someone else would think? How many dreams got shelved because criticism arrived before your courage did? How many nights vanished replaying a sentence someone else forgot by breakfast? Imagine how much of your life you'd get back if you stopped letting strangers write your story for you. The Stoics never went begging the world for approval. Every evening they asked themselves a much tougher question instead. Did I live by my own principles today? If yes, praise became unnecessary. If no, other people's opinions became irrelevant, because the only verdict that ever truly mattered had already been delivered by their own conscience. The day you stop carrying every stray opinion thrown your way, the day you stop measuring yourself by applause or rejection, is the day the world loses one of its sharpest weapons against you. No insult can break a person who's stopped asking strangers to decide who he is. Law 7. Character is whatever's left when everything else is gone. Eventually, in every life, titles stop meaning anything. Wealth loses its grip. Beauty fades on schedule. Fame goes quiet. The applause dries up. The people who used to fill your room suddenly find somewhere else to be. And in that silence, life asks a question no achievement can answer without any of it. Who are you? Most people spend their whole existence building an identity on things they were never actually going to keep forever. They believe they are their success until failure shows up. They believe they are their reputation until a lie spreads. They believe they are their possessions until life reclaims them. They build their sense of self on ground time was always going to erode. Then the storm arrives, not to punish them, but simply to show what was built on sand all along. The Stoics understood that the one thing life can never actually steal is character. Everything else is on loan. Your health is on loan. Your youth is on loan. Your influence is on loan. Even the people you love most are gifts you were entrusted with, not guarantees you were promised. But courage, integrity, wisdom, self-command, these are the one set of assets no emperor can seize, no thief can pocket, no tragedy can erase, unless you hand them over yourself. Picture an old lighthouse on the worst night of the year. Waves slam its walls with total violence. Wind screams overhead. Lightning splits the horizon apart. Ships vanish into the black, and the lighthouse doesn't chase the storm down or beg the sea for mercy. It just keeps doing exactly what it was built to do. It stands, it shines, it stays. Eventually the storm moves on. The lighthouse is still standing exactly where it always was. That's what Stoic character looks like. Quiet, not seeking applause, simply refusing to become someone else just because things got hard. Marcus Aurelius wrote his private journal while surrounded by betrayal, plague, corrupt politics, and endless war. And through all those pages, he rarely asked how to control the empire before asking how to control himself. He understood something almost every generation forgets. A man who can't govern his own mind will eventually lose control of everything else he's trying to manage. Winning the outside world means nothing if you've already lost to your own appetites. History keeps proving this. Some men conquered kingdoms and were quietly conquered by greed. Others amassed fortunes and were destroyed by pride. Some commanded millions of people, yet were slaves to their own anger, pleasure, or fear. The world remembers their accomplishments, but it also remembers the collapse. Why? Because talent earns admiration, but only character earns trust. And when history decides who's actually worth remembering, it always ranks character above the resume. Nature keeps whispering the same truth. The oldest tree in the forest isn't admired because it grew fast. It's admired because it's still standing after seasons that took down everything around it. Every scar in its bark is the record of a storm it refused to give in to. Those scars aren't weakness, they're proof of endurance. Human character runs on the same logic. Your deepest wounds don't lower your worth. Handled with wisdom, they become the evidence that life tested you and couldn't talk you out of yourself. There's another layer hidden here, powerful enough that most people spend a lifetime avoiding it. Every decision you make when nobody's watching is quietly building who you'll be when everybody finally is. Integrity is never built in public, it's forged in private, in the temptation nobody else knows about, in the promise kept when breaking it would have been easier, in the truth chosen when the lie would have protected your image. Character isn't created in the big dramatic moments. Those moments simply reveal the character you've been quietly building all along in the ordinary ones. Ask yourself, if every title vanished tomorrow, if every possession disappeared before sunrise, if every person forgot your name, would there still be something inside you worth respecting? The Stoics gave their entire lives to making sure the answer would always be yes, because they understood the greatest win isn't becoming famous, it's becoming someone who stays honorable, even when there's no one left to reward him for it. The world will always chase power. It will always worship wealth. It will always applaud victory. But time eventually strips every one of those things from every human being. And when that day comes, only one question survives. Did you become a better person, or did you simply become a more successful one? Law 8. Remember that you will die, and you'll finally learn to live. A shadow trails every human being from the moment they're born. It walks beside kings and beggars alike, philosophers and soldiers, the wealthy and the broke. It never speaks, it never rushes, and it never forgets a single name. Most people spend their whole lives trying not to look at it, burying it under ambition, noise, and constant motion. The Stoics did something different. They turned around and looked straight at it. Not because they were obsessed with dying, and not because they hated life. They thought about death precisely because they loved life too much to waste it. They understood something we conveniently forget. When you assume time is infinite, you start spending it carelessly. You postpone the dream. You delay the hard conversation. You wait for a perfect moment that never actually arrives. In trying to protect your life, you slowly forget to live it. Marcus Aurelius wrote the same reminder to himself again and again. You could walk out of this life right now. Let that shape everything you do, say, and think. That wasn't fear talking, that was clarity. Because once you truly accept that time is limited, petty worries lose their grip, small arguments stop mattering, and the noise of other people's opinions goes quiet. What's left is what actually counted the whole time. Picture someone crossing a wide desert as the sun drops toward the horizon. Every step matters more because he knows daylight isn't unlimited. He doesn't waste time circling back or chasing distractions. He walks with purpose because he knows something valuable is slipping away with every minute. Human life runs the same way. Every day feels routine, until one day you look back and realize it was part of a countdown all along. Seneca said it plainly, it's not that our life is short, it's that we throw away most of it. Think about how much time disappears worrying about things that never even happen. How many hours vanish chasing approval from people who barely think about us? How many chances slip by because fear told us to wait one more day? The real tragedy was never death itself. The tragedy is reaching the end and realizing you spent years occupying space instead of actually living. Nature teaches this without a single sentence. Leaves fall every autumn, and the tree doesn't fight the season. The sun sets every night without grief. Rivers keep moving toward the sea without any fear of the ending. Everything in the natural world accepts change and endings and simply keeps doing what it's for. Only humans act like life is supposed to be permanent and suffer needlessly because of that illusion. The Stoics practiced memento mori, remember you will die. On the surface it sounds bleak, but buried inside, it is one of the most freeing ideas ever discovered. If your time is limited, then every moment gains actual weight. Every conversation matters, every small kindness matters, every choice carries meaning. Death doesn't drain life of value, it's the very thing that gives life its value at all. Picture an old candle burning in a quiet room. It has no idea how long its flame will last. And yet it doesn't spend the time it has fearing the dark. It just gives light while it can. People usually do the reverse. We burn so much energy dreading loss that we forget to actually shine. We postpone joy until success arrives. We postpone peace until conditions improve. We postpone life itself, convinced there's always going to be more time. Then, without warning, time speaks. And in that moment, wealth can't buy another hour. Power can't stall the inevitable. Fame can't negotiate with what's coming. The only thing left is one question: did you actually live? This is why the Stoics weren't afraid of death. They were afraid of something much bigger, reaching the end and realizing they never actually lived by what they claimed to value. They feared burning the rare, brief gift of existence on anger, envy, distraction, and fears that were never even real. So remember, you are not promised another year, another month, not even another day. That's not a reason for despair. It's a reason to wake up. Say the words that matter. Build the thing worth building. Become who you already know you're capable of becoming. Because a life isn't measured by its length. It's measured by its depth. And maybe that's the whole point of Stoicism. The moment you stop fearing the end, you stop postponing the beginning. The moment you remember time is scarce, you stop wasting it. And the moment you accept life is temporary, you finally understand how to live on, through whatever character you leave behind. There's an old Stoic belief that every person dies twice. The first death happens when the body takes its final breath. The second happens much later, the moment the last trace of your character fades from the people you touched. The Stoics never spent their lives trying to dodge the first death. They spent their lives making absolutely sure the second one never came. Look back at everything you've just walked through. You've learned that the storm isn't yours to control, only the wheel is. That hardship you choose builds a mind comfort never could. That fear shrinks the moment you look it in the eye before it arrives. That obstacles aren't interruptions, they're invitations. That mastering the pause matters more than winning any argument. That someone else's opinion was never qualified to define your worth. That character is the one thing life can never actually take from you. And finally, that remembering death is exactly what teaches you how to live. These aren't ideas meant to sound impressive in conversation. They're meant to reshape the quiet moments of your life, the ones nobody's watching, nobody's clapping for, nobody even knows you're fighting through. Because that's exactly where real strength gets built, not in public wins, in private decisions. The world you step back into after this won't look any different. Difficult people are still out there. Unexpected failure is still coming. The storms still won't ask your permission before they show up. But if even one of these laws takes root in you, something real shifts. The world stays the same, but the person walking through it won't be. Years from now, you probably won't remember every line you heard today. But if even one law sticks deep enough to actually live by, this was worth making. Wisdom was never measured by how much you know. It's always been measured by how much you become. So before you go, ask yourself one last thing. When life tests you tomorrow, will you react like the person you've always been, or respond like the person you've decided to become? If this reached you, don't let it stop here. Drop a comment on which law hit hardest and why. Someone reading it might find exactly the words they needed today. And if you want more of this, timeless wisdom, real philosophy, principles that build the mind instead of feeding the ego, subscribe and stay for the next one. Until then, protect your peace, master your mind, and remember, the strongest person in the room is rarely the loudest one. It's the one who's learned to stay unshaken no matter what life puts in front of him.